So we're going to review some more legit gameplay. The two main things to pay attention to this game is how stiff the aiming movements are and how little pre-aiming I'm doing. The aim on the 360 is really not spongy and elastic like we've been seeing in the tournaments a lot. Like with the spring movement, movements can be elastic on MCC. They're not elastic on the 360. And then we're going to see how much differently I approach new areas of the map. And it's pretty obvious, and your gameplay is going to be like this too. And then there's something pretty interesting at the end that's going to require me to reevaluate some of the indicators. So let's go. That back and forth was a little sharp there, but I'm playing on 6 sensitivity, and I bet that's higher than anybody in the tournament, besides like 2 players maybe, and we can see that this really isn't that sharp. You see how gradually I did this? I'm gradually moving into the area in a neutral way, and then I'm acquiring my targets. That's how people play. You don't walk to this corner and then make a snap adjustment to the exact spot that there's a player, potentially exposing yourself to return fire before you even have your reticle close to where you want it. That's not how people play. That's not how you should play. Because if you were actually doing that, you would be snapping way past your target constantly. They don't do that very much, of course, because they're cheating. There was kind of a clap on that kill. The clap is a legitimate movement. It's a loss of aiming assistance, and then suddenly realizing, like, wait, did I kill that guy? And trying to aim at them again. But you can see that mine's a lot gentler, and I'm playing on a higher sensitivity. The aimbot clap is really sharp and really fast before this response would be reasonable. And again, people are always saying, oh, they're getting callouts, they're getting callouts. I'm playing with radar, and I'm not snapping to players I can't see. And the pros callouts really weren't that much more detailed than my crews. Slightly, but getting slightly better callouts doesn't lead to pixel perfect acquisitions. Grow up. Like this guy. I knew there were guys there. This guy was probably even on the radar, but I don't snap to him before I can see him. After I see them, I can snap to them. You see how absurd it would be for me to somehow know where that guy is? I had the timing on that guy's push pretty close with that nade, and then I approach the corner safely and neutrally, and then acquire the target after I can see them. This is what Halo looks like. Again, I'm not running to this corner and then turning at the last second as I'm coming into view when I think there's a player there. That's not safe because you don't actually know where they're at. It's like with Ogre's bad technique that I've talked about. You're leaving space on the inside corner that you're not covering visually as you move into the area. And then after you get to the corner and make this large snap movement, now you just run the risk of aiming past anybody who's in that space that you just covered with your reticle. Clearly suboptimal, not safe. Nobody plays like that. And I don't know why I didn't jump there. I expected there to be a guy there. Wasn't snapping to him. This is actually kind of close. I make a little adjustment there. So maybe I would flag that one, but I don't come that close to them, and it's a little softer than a snap. But this one's kind of close. So we could maybe count this one, but it's in a doorway and I expected someone to be there. This one, you can see I wasn't even close. The idea that people would be constantly turning into the middle of construct and snap aiming directly to players is ridiculous. That's not how you play Halo. And this is a good example too, for the lack of whips. You're not going to see me whip in any of my games. I can pretty much guarantee that. You can see once I'm on target, I pretty much stay on target. I'm not getting on target and then sharply moving my aim off because I'm a good player, not a bad player. Only bad players would move their aim sharply off target once they're finally getting aim assistance, and the pros are doing that constantly. I acquire the target, and then I try to smoothly stay on target, which isn't really that hard. I'm not snapping directly to players and then having my aim fly off of them for a split second. We're probably not going to see that one time in this video. Not snapping to players immediately on spawn because I'm not cheating. Another gradual approach because I aim like a man, not a child. That one I guess you could count, but I'm aiming at a specific spot for a specific reason, after pretty much visually clearing the purple. Again, I can see my teammate is shooting at the middle of the map, and there's several players out there, but I'm not going to be able to snap to any of them when I can't see them, because that's not how shooters work. There's maybe a little bit of a stutter here, but it's not a bad one. Pretty gentle, actually. And then just again, I'm on target shooting the player. My aim's not going to whip off and on repeatedly and flip around which side of the body it's on. Players that were, quote, way better than me, their aim should stay more on target than mine, right? So here again, it just becomes obvious where this player is, so I'm able to snap to them, more or less, because they're so close to me too. I'm never going to flag someone for one like this when it's in isolation, and I can tell that they're not just doing it constantly because they're cheating. Just to talk about this for the last time in this video, even these last two kills, I just have my reticle in a neutral place, and then I see the target, and then I try and shoot them. I'm not doing it backwards. So this is the clip that's pretty interesting to me, and that might require me to reevaluate some indicators, because that's the worst slow turn I've seen in a legit game, and it seems like I lock on my teammate, and then I play some Tetris. The Tetris indicator I just named recently but I'm not sure it's really a thing. It just seemed to be in the tournaments more than I expected. And you can see again that my Tetris is a little bit more gentle, and if anything just shows that the pros' thumbs really aren't that much different than mine. But this slow turn was really noticeable, so I might have to throw that indicator out. Although I know the aimbot does that, and it probably does it more often. This is literally the first one I've seen in my gameplay. So yeah, I might have to throw out that indicator for the 360, but I'm pretty sure it would still be reliable for MCC. So yeah, obvious slow turn, and then my Tetris is pretty gentle. And again, the Tetris indicator, I'm not going to accuse somebody for it. It's just axial movements, and I'm not going to accuse someone for that alone. And it's not really a reliable indicator until it's axial movements that are too fast. And that's always been the case for that indicator. But I do have to revise the slow turn now. So yeah, last time I'll mention this. You don't run around constructs snapping to players you can't see. Not a clap, just missing because the aim assistance goes away, and then trying to reacquire quickly. Nice and gradual, not snapping at the last second. Not great numbers, but my reaction time was pretty bad that game a couple times too, so I'm probably hammered. And that's not really the point. And people say, like, oh, you just don't know how to play. That's why you're not aiming at people you can't see. But I don't really give a fuck what anybody says, because I was ranked like number 200 on the closest thing to a global ranking system that ever existed when I was in my 20s and not my mid 40s. So those people can shut the fuck up. I obviously know how to play. So those players are either cheaters or cope cases. I don't really care. So yeah, one complete game. There were maybe 3 pre-aimings, and they were all either in doorways or when I was targeting a very specific spot. So not ones that I would flag. The one in the doorway probably wasn't close enough to flag either. So no pre-aimings. Playing with radar. Next game. You should be able to see this by now. I'm not making last second adjustments to try and catch these players. I'm just waiting for them to become shootable. Wasn't even close. A little awkward, but again, every movement is stiff. It's not elastic or spongy. There's a little stutter there, but it's pretty gentle again. One little thing like that I'm never going to flag someone for. Just calmly staying on target, not a bunch of sharp whips. And no stuttering. Nice little gradual corrections. I'm not making sharp little movements, trying to stay on target.
Gain the lead. Gain the lead.
I saw that player before I tried to acquire them. This one I might notice, because I make a little adjustment that hits this player's center line, but I knew there was probably a player there, and they're on a narrow walkway. But that is the first one this game that I would usually notice. And then I might notice this one for being coincidental, but obviously that just happens sometimes.
Gain the lead. Gain the lead.
Just nice and gradual. I knew there were probably players here. I wasn't trying to snap to them before I can see them, because it's not really possible to do that. This is common sense. You guys know this.
Gain the lead. Gain the lead.
That one might have been close, but this player was on radar by that point. And you can see that I'm doing this a little bit before they became visible, which means I'm doing this properly. I'm not doing it in the same frame that they become visible. If I expect this player to be in a specific spot, it's too late to make the adjustment by that point. And then yeah, no flip-flop movement, no lucky movement, no whips, no target confusion, just even, stiff movements, where I'm moving into new parts of the map, putting my reticle in a neutral spot, and then using my motion to gradually bring my reticle into the new area. So this one, I'm never going to flag because I'm playing with radar. And again, they're in a doorway. So in isolation, I wouldn't include this one. But to be fair, we can say we're up to 3, but it was a guy on a walkway and then 2 people on radar. You didn't see me snapping to that guy. No whipping, no sharp stuttering. There is a sharp movement after the kill here, though. I would call this a sharp back and forth, and I would be pretty surprised if there weren't missing frames here. Delayed frame. So a couple delayed frames. I've had to be careful with this sometimes, because delayed frames and dropped frames, sometimes the game doesn't always make them up in the frame you would expect. I'm not sure if that's the way to properly explain it, but I've had to be careful about this before. Like, even though the dropped frames didn't happen during the movement, if they're on either end of the movement, they can contribute significantly to the movement appearing to be too sharp. I'm not really sure that's the case here, but this movement isn't sharp enough to flag anyways. It's pretty close, but I'm on a pretty high sensitivity compared to MLG. And with the delayed frames, it's a little borderline. But I would probably flag this, actually. That was a little fast. My snap there was off target. But that player was on radar anyways.
Killing spree.
I know exactly where those players are, and I'm not trying to snap to them at the last second, because that would be stupid. As soon as I'm expecting a player to come into view, why would I try to make some sharp adjustment where I don't even know where the reticle's going to end up? I expect the player to be there, and I'm just going to make some sharp adjustment that might land anywhere instead of approaching the area calmly without making any sudden movements so I know where my reticle is in relation to everything going on. It makes no sense. It's literally not how people play shooters. I saw the guy go up the lift, so not pre-aiming, and he was on radar, so not pre-aiming. Just again, like even here when I can see the players on radar, and I'm expecting that there might be people top mid, I'm not going to try to snap to them before I can see them, because that's not how Halo works. That's not how you play the game. That's not how you play any shooter. I'm going to put my reticle in a nice approximate location, and then I'm going to see what's going on, and then I'm going to try and shoot people. It's just common sense, man. Again, I know I'm repeating myself a lot, and I know I do that a lot, but turning into the middle of construct, snapping to players, even if you're getting a call out, is ridiculous. The aim is not sticky. On the 360, you actually had to try and aim, and it's just such an open part of the map. And there's multiple vertical levels that players can be. You can't walk into the middle of construct snapping to players. The game literally does not work that way. And how many times have we seen that, right? Just from commentated videos. This stuff was happening so much in the tournaments. It's a complete joke. These guys are not going to get away with this.
Double kill.
So yeah, no pre-aiming there. I snap off target first.
Killing frenzy.
Kind of a last second adjustment there, but it's not right to this player. That's missing by quite a bit. I would never flag that one. A little wonky, but nothing that weird. There might be a dropped frame in there. It looks like maybe half of a flip-flop, but a flip-flop isn't a flip-flop until the reticle returns to the first position. It's when it switches back and forth, and that's not what happened here. That's getting close to being a whip, but it's not the immediate whip. It's just a bad adjustment. We'll check for dropped frames. No drop frames. So that one's a little weird. I would notice that one, but it's not really a whip, it's just a bad adjustment. Whips are sharper and more immediate. And I'm not quite on target there. I was still missing. So it's a situation where I would try and make that adjustment. And whips are when they're right on target, and then they're completely losing the target anyways, despite supposedly being a lot better than everybody. Like if you have a bunch of whips in your gameplay, it's going to be because you're not very good at the game. Sorry. So yeah, this one, not close enough, and our motion is mirrored, so it's not a divergent off tracking. A little back and forth there, but not fast enough to even be a stutter. That's kind of close. But the one player died. There's a second player behind him. It's okay for something a little weird to happen there. Shooting that player as it goes around the corner, not snapping my aim past the wall, and then having it rebound. So again, I can't quite remember to recount all of the pre-aimings, but we didn't see anyone that was bad. They're on a walkway. I expect somebody's there. They're really close to me in a corner. They're in a doorway. I'm trying to aim at a specific spot for a different reason. The players are on radar and in a confined spot. Those are the only types we're seeing, right? Every game is going to be like that. We're not going to see whips. We're not going to see me sharply stuttering. We're not going to see me turn corners with 8 separate movements like a child who just picked up a controller. You're watching something that pretty much looks like when you play the game, right? I'm not hyperactively, spastically flicking my aim in these tiny little movements that are going on target, off target. I'm trying to calmly shoot my targets in a controlled manner. unless they're close to me and the situation is frenetic, and then some things like that go out the window. But a professional's aim should be more controlled than mine if their aim is better than mine. That's how this game worked on the 360. 25% dead zones, running at 30 frames per second. You're not flicking your thumbstick all over the place. Just go try it for yourself if you have a 360. It's a complete joke. Moving on. There I'm just targeting a specific spot, not a pre-aiming.
Gain the lead.
I mean, you should be able to see already that my aim is more controlled and less spastic than the pros, and that's literally the opposite of what should be happening. And people can say, oh, their thumbs are just way different, or they're just faster, but what they're doing is suboptimal, so they wouldn't be doing it. Somebody with the best thumb in the world still wouldn't aim in a suboptimal way. If I was trying to snap to people at the last second with sharp movements, this would be happening to me even more often. This one I would flag, but they're in a predictable spot, and this is the first time that I've gotten something like this right, and obviously again this is going to happen. But this is the first one where my timing was suspicious, if this was happening a lot. But we're on the third game here, and this is the first time this has really happened. Wasn't even close to that guy. Opening up the visual area with my aiming nice and controlled. So yeah, I won't mention that anymore. It should just be obvious to you by this point that I'm approaching the map neutrally and then snapping to players after I can see them, because that's how shooters work. I'm never going to get tired of saying that, but I'll try to stop. So I saw these guys on radar, and my movement hit center line and was a little mechanical, so I would count this one. But this stuff does happen, so again, we're seeing just isolated little indicators that are the ones that can obviously happen in legit gameplay sometimes. But obviously, there's indicators that we're not seeing and we're not going to see. That one's pretty close, but still not right on the target. I see him at 47. And then I acquire at 0-0. So that was almost a quarter of a second. So I wouldn't even flag this one for a tournament. I'm almost always taking these ones out. I'm always giving the pros credit for having reaction time that would make that one possible, unless it becomes clear afterwards that it was an accident. And there, with the delay in my zooming and shooting, I would say that was probably an accident. Not quite on target though, but I would notice this one if this player had a pattern of that, which I don't. And yeah, again, I just have to say, I make a sharp acquisition movement, and then I'm staying on target. I'm not sharply acquiring the target, and then having my aim flail off wildly, because I'm not a bad player. And supposedly the pros weren't bad players either, but we all know the truth, don't we? Just a bad input, and not even close to being sharp enough to be a whip. When we go back to seeing whips, you're going to remember what they look like. And again, I bet my sensitivity here is higher than anybody in the tournament. Like, even knowing that guy was going to be there, making an adjustment to that specific spot in pretty much the same frame that player becomes visible is ridiculous. These players are not special enough to be able to time things to the frame. Because they're a human being. And why would you ever try? Why would you ever try to be that erratic when you can just wait and let them move into your reticle? You're going to do some last second sharp adjustment that makes your aiming erratic instead of just waiting for that person to move into your reticle. It's common sense. Another thing we're not going to see in my gameplay is smooth flowing movements, because as we've talked about before, you can't do them with a 25% dead zone. And then yeah, I get a little erratic here because it's one of those close quarters weird situations, but you can see my movements are kind of sharp, but they're not too sharp. They still have weight, and they're not flowing. They're not smooth, blended together flowing movements, because those literally are impossible on this console. they're still weighty and they're stiff. Something else we can notice too, besides a couple adjustments I made after a target died, because I was surprised they died, we haven't seen any claps or any funky releases. We're on to the third game here, and we can see that corners and geometry and losing sight of my target has next to no impact on my BR reticle. Obviously, that's something we're seeing in the tournaments a lot, and it's literally not how the game works. This one was kind of close to hitting center line. But it's really not that close. But it's kind of close. I would notice that one if I knew the player was cheating already. But again, it's not that close. It's not a pattern. Your reticle has to go somewhere. I knew right where that player was. They're in a doorway. I wouldn't count that one unless it's again part of a pattern of doing this in open parts of the map, which we can see that I haven't done. Really not that sharp of a movement. That little back and forth on the acquisition. Not sharp at all. I maybe hit this guy's center line, but he's on radar. Obviously, if I didn't have radar, I wouldn't really know which side of this hole to look at. And yeah, I'm literally never going to flag somebody on Xbox Live for extra shooting like that. Not even close. So this is one that I'm never going to flag in a tournament because this just happens to align and I'm not making adjustments. It's just my motion happening to coincide with this player becoming visible. I'm sure the aimbot does this though.
Killing frenzy.
Didn't target this guy with a last second adjustment. Just put my reticle in the doorway, acquired the target when I could see it. That movement there had a little bit of elasticity on it, but it's not the elasticity that I'm talking about, where the movement has a lot of pop and elasticity to it. This is just acceleration and deacceleration. But it was a little elastic, and that's a descriptor that I just started using recently, and it might not be the best way to describe it. And I'm also just now getting back to 360 gameplay, but it's not a poppy little movement that's elastic. It's a big back and forth where I'm going through the entire range of motion. When they're small and poppy and elastic, that's when you know they're bullshit. I might revise that later, but I'm pretty comfortable saying that. There's a little shimmy in my motion there, and this player is on a ramp. So maybe I would notice this one for hitting center line, but I wouldn't count this in isolation. Kind of far off the player too. You can see I'm just going down there neutrally, and my reticle happens to align. My aim was a little sharp there, kind of some small movements and a little bit sharp, but it's not stuttering and it's not that erratic, and it's not something I'm trying to do. It's something that's going to happen in my aim every once in a while, probably, but I'm not trying to aim like that. And there's players in the tournament, including players like Pistola and Ogre 2, who are aiming like that constantly, and you shouldn't be trying to aim like that. And there might have been some delayed frames in there too. It looked like the game was running a little wonky. There was one bad pre-aiming in this one. That was cross map to open street. That was really the worst pre-aiming that we saw, and really the only one I would flag in isolation. So we saw 1 in 3 games. If the pros were doing this even 5 times, 10 times in a game, I would be fine with it. But again, when you consider all the different types of pre-aiming, it's happening like 30 times a game, 40 times a game, if not more than that. Neighbor practically has a bad one every time they go to his POV for even 30 seconds. It's a complete joke. Now that you've seen some of this, and seen that my gameplay looks normal, you can go back to the tournaments and see it for yourself now. It's going to be super obvious to you. But again, it's really about the indicators. This is the completely up-to-date list, and yeah, obviously we're seeing pretty much none of these. And these indicators don't have anything to do with being good. I don't have conveyor belt movements, because that's not how people use a thumbstick. Obviously no vertical chopping or pulsing. You're not going to see that on the 360. Trying to input short, sharp vertical movements on the 360 is a recipe for disaster, and there's no reason to do it. I'm not going to go down the whole list here, but you can check this out. This is all stuff that we've seen hundreds of times in the tournaments. Hundreds of times. That was 20 minutes of gameplay just now. And I forget what the rate was for MLG, but something like 100, 130 per hour, something like that. And we maybe talked about 10 things, most of which were too gentle and not even close to being good examples of any of these indicators, except for the slow turn. The slow turn might be out, because that was the worst one I've ever seen in a legit game. I still don't think it should happen on current gen. But yeah, if you go down the list here, we're not seeing any of this stuff. Tiny, fast circles, give me a break. None of this stuff is in here. Okay, 1 game on the pit, because everyone loves the pit. I saw this player on radar, and I hear the shooting and see the shooting and everything, but he was off radar before this snap. So this one I would obviously flag. This actually looks a lot like what we've seen in the tournaments. It has that timing to it, right? So we're up to 2 noticeable ones. So maybe I'll do that later. Just commentate 1 game from the tournaments, showing every time there's a pre-aiming or a variation on pre-aiming, commentating all those variations and counting them up, because I can pretty much guarantee it's multiple per minute. But yeah, we're up to 2 on our 4th game.
Gain the lead. Gain the lead.
There's only so many callouts for this entire corner of the map. You can't get a callout for this part of the map and then snap to the player. There's not that many callouts on this map, but there's a lot of pixels. That guy was on radar, and I just timed it with my motion. My aim changes speed on the target there. I would notice that because it's kind of a coincidence, but it's not an indicator. Just a little wonky. Not pre-aiming, just a motion coincidence, and not a very strong one. Not even close to pre-aiming, just natural movement. Notice I'm not sucking with the rockets, and then after that there's just some wonky movements, but no indicators. That release was a little sharp, actually. And usually I would say it's easy to tell when it's not suddenly popping off the target as soon as the target dies, and you can kind of tell that it's an aiming adjustment made when there's no aim assistance, but actually I would find this one kind of suspicious. So we've had 2 mildly suspicious movements and 2 bad pre-aimings in 4 games, and none of the complete BS and sharp stuttering, turning corners with 8 movements bullshit. That aligns with that player's center line in the green box, but it's just a coincidence. This happening a couple times a game is never going to lead me to accuse a player. This player was on radar, and that's actually pretty far off. So yeah, once again, 2 suspicious pre-aimings in 4 games, and a few mildly suspicious movements, none of which are the textbook examples of any indicator. But again, it's just because I'm not a good player. Because I wasn't ranked 200 in the whole fucking world. And me and TZ literally played 5 nights a week for a month and lost 2 games once. And that's when I was completely washed. The only reason that I'm not aiming at players I can't see the entire game is because I suck. So yeah, not many indicators. Obviously my gameplay is completely different. My reticle movement is different. I would argue it's better because it's smoother and more controlled, which again is the exact opposite of what should be the case when you're playing on shitty hardware. Next, I'm probably going to make my video about how to strafe, and then I'll probably review some more legit gameplay. I feel like this is valuable for you and for me as well to refine the indicators, because a lot of these indicators were things that I picked up during the tournaments. And now as I'm going back to legit gameplay, I wasn't 100% right about some of this stuff, but close enough. See you next time.